All right, so you know how sometimes you're like reading a food label and you get to the ingredients and it's like, what even is this stuff?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like today's episode is going to be about one of those ingredients.
Okay.
But trust me, way more interesting than it sounds.
Right?
We're doing a deep dive on starch converting operators.
Okay.
And to help us out, we've got some awesome resources from RoleCatcher.com.
Yeah, RoleCatcher is great for this kind of stuff. Really gives you the inside scoop.
Exactly. They've got the real deal on what this career is actually like.
Hmm.
Not just the textbook definition.
Right. It's one thing to read a job description. It's another to actually know what you'd be doing every day.
Totally.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, can you give us a quick rundown of what a starch converting operator actually does?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, they're the ones turning regular old starch into things like glucose dextrose. All those things you see on ingredient
Oh,
lists.
so that's where that comes from.
Yep. And even high fructose corn syrup.
Huh.
They're basically like operating this machinery that transforms the starch, and then they got to monitor the whole process super carefully.
So it's not just like dumping a bunch of cornstarch in a giant pot and hoping for the best.
Yeah, no. It's way more high tech than that. They're working with some pretty complex equipment.
The RoleCatcher guide uses the phrase orchestrating complex machinery, which honestly sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, it's definitely not your grandpa's factory job. There's a lot of automation and computer control involved these days.
Like what kind of technology are we talking about here?
Well, they've got systems with names like SCADA and PLC, which help automate and control the whole conversion process.
Okay, those sound pretty intense.
They are, but they make the job a lot more efficient and precise.
Speaking of precise, guys, I'm also seeing hazardous materials mentioned in the guide. What kind of safety protocols are involved in this line of work?
Yes, safety is a huge deal in this field since they are dealing with chemicals and high heat.
Right, makes sense.
So they get tons of training on how to handle hazardous materials, how to use all the right safety gear, and what to do in an emergency.
So it's not a job for someone who's careless or easily distracted.
Definitely not. Attention to detail is key.
It's easy to forget that there are actual people behind all those ingredients we see on labels,
Right, for sure.
and that their jobs are about a lot more than just making things taste sweet.
Exactly.
Speaking of sweet, I'm curious about those career stages RoleCatcher outlines.
Okay, yeah.
So you're a starch converting operator, you've mastered all the technical stuff. What's next? What does climbing that career ladder look like?
Well, think of it like this, just like a perfect batch of, corn syrup. A career in starch conversion has its own kind of stages.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. So RoleCatcher breaks it down really well. And usually you'd start as an entry-level operator.
Makes sense. Start at the beginning.
Right. And at that level, you're really getting your hands dirty, so to speak.
So like lots of on-the-job training.
Exactly. You're learning how everything works from the ground up, working alongside those more experienced operators.
Learning from the pros.
Yep. And as you gain experience and knowledge, you can move up to a junior operator role.
Okay, so what's different at that level? What are you doing differently?
So as a junior operator, you'd have more responsibility, maybe even supervising some of the newer operators coming in.
Ah, so you start taking on more of a leadership role.
Exactly. And then after that, you could become a senior operator.
Senior operators, that's like the top level.
Pretty much at that point, you're leading teams, you're optimizing the whole conversion process. You really are the go-to expert.
Okay, go-to expert. That sounds impressive. What's an example of like a project a senior operator might work on?
Sure. So the RoleCatcher guide mentioned something called Lean Six Sigma.
Lean Six Sigma. That sounds kind of intimidating, honestly.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, it's all about improving efficiency and cutting out waste.
Okay, so making the process better overall.
Exactly like a senior operator might use Lean Six Sigma to analyze the entire production line, figure out where the bottlenecks are, and come up with ways to streamline everything.
Wow, so they're not just making sure the machines are running right, they're making sure the whole operation's running as smoothly as possible.
Right. And in the process, they're probably saving the company money and reducing waste, which is good for everyone.
That's awesome. So it's like problem solving on a whole other level.
Exactly. And on top of all that, senior operators often mentor junior staff too. So there's that whole other layer of responsibility.
Right, because at that point, you're not just responsible for your own work, you're responsible for helping others succeed too.
It's about sharing your knowledge and experience and building up the next generation of starch superstars or something.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the day-to-day and the career path, but let's be real for a second. Before you can even think about leading a team or, launching Lean Six Sigma projects, you've got to get through the interview,
Oh, yeah, the interview.
which, let's be honest, can be super nerve-wracking.
Tell me about it.
But luckily, RoleCatcher doesn't just leave you hanging when it comes to interview prep.
Definitely not. They've got your back.
So let's say you totally nailed that interview, right?
Okay.
You're officially a starch converting operator. Congratulations.
Woo!
But as we've kind of seen already, this isn't a career where you just learn everything once and then you're good to go.
Right. It's not like riding a bike.
Exactly. So how do you keep your skills up to date? How do you stay ahead of the curve in this whole starch world?
Well, RoleCatcher talks a lot about continuous learning.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, because technology is always changing. Industry standards change, new products pop up.
Oh, totally. I mean, you don't want to be stuck using outdated techniques while everyone else is zooming past you.
Exactly.
So what does continuous learning actually look like for a starch converting operator? Does that mean going back to school for a starch PhD?
Haha. No, not necessarily. I mean, unless you want to be Dr. Starch.
Dr. Starch. They like the sound of that.
Yeah, right. But luckily, there are some less intense options. RoleCatcher mentions online courses, for example.
Well, yeah, online courses are huge these days.
Right. You can learn so much on your own time at your own pace.
Perfect for fitting it in around your work schedule.
Exactly. And then there are also industry-specific workshops and seminars.
Okay, so you can get really hands-on experience.
Exactly. Those are great for diving deep into new technologies or, specific techniques.
So whether you're a digital learner or someone who likes to get their hands dirty, there are options.
Totally.
What about professional organizations? Do those play a role in all this?
Oh, absolutely. Joining a professional organization is like leveling up your career.
How so?
Well, for starters, you get to network with other people in the industry.
Ah, so that's not just about what you know, it's about who you know.
Exactly. And you might even find a mentor, someone who can give you advice and guidance.
That's so valuable, especially in a field like this.
Totally. Plus, these organizations often have their own training resources that you wouldn't be able to access otherwise.
So it's like this whole hidden world of learning and development just for starch enthusiasts.
Pretty much.
I love it. Well, it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We really have.
From the ins and outs of the job itself, to the career path, and even how to ace the interview and beyond.
RoleCatcher really does give you the full picture.
They really do. And on that note, it's time for us to wrap things up. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay, shoot.
We've talked a lot about the how of this career, but what about the what's next?
Ooh, I like that.
As technology advances and we learn more about starch, who knows what amazing new things we'll be able to create.
Right, what does the future hold for starch?
Exactly.
Right.
Maybe one day we'll all be wearing clothes made from corn-driving cars powered by dextrose, all thanks to the ingenuity of starch converting operators.
Yeah, that would be something.
It just goes to show that the world of starch conversion is full of possibilities.
Totally.
So keep learning, keep exploring, and who knows what amazing discoveries you might make. And with that, we'll say goodbye for today. But remember, the world of fascinating careers doesn't stop here.
Nope. There's a whole world of cool jobs out there just waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, happy learning, everyone.